The night was thick with the kind of silence that comes after words you can't take back. Anger had left its echo in the walls, and pride stood like smoke that refused to clear. He could still hear his father's voice, low but sharp, cutting through years of misunderstanding. The house smelled of rain and regret, of dinners uneaten and dreams that never left the table. A son ready to leave, a father too proud to stop him. The door waited like a verdict. Sometimes love hides behind the loudest voices, and silence becomes its punishment. How many miles does regret travel before it finds home? The road stretched out like punishment. Every raindrop that hit the windshield sounded like something left unsaid. He could still see their faces, his mother's trembling lips, his father's hard stare. It should have ended with words softer than anger, but pride was louder that night. Now, with every mile, the distance grew not just in geography, but in memory. And deep down, he already knew. Some doors close with more than a lock. They close with silence. Morning came, but peace didn't. He checked his phone, no messages. The world moved on. Coffee brewed, traffic hummed, but his mind stayed in that kitchen. Pride was supposed to feel strong. Instead, it left him hollow. Sometimes he wondered if his father missed him, but he buried the thought before it grew roots. Love and resentment often wear the same mask. Nights were harder. The silence of the apartment reminded him too much of the one he left behind. He turned on the TV to drown out the memory of his father's voice. But no matter how loud it got, the echo remained, sharp, unfinished, unforgiven. He'd told himself they were both too stubborn to reach out. Truth was, he just didn't know how. Days turned into years before he noticed. The fight became a memory so old it started to fade, until one night, as he scrolled through messages he'd never sent, the phone rang. His heart stilled. Some calls don't bring news. They bring reckoning. The city had swallowed him whole. Its noise filled every quiet place inside him, leaving no room for memory, or so he thought. Years had gone by since he'd last seen home. He'd built a life of half-truths. A job that paid the bills, friendships that stayed at arm's length, and laughter that never quite reached his eyes. When pride becomes armor, even love can find a way in. He told himself he didn't miss them, but sometimes the lie was louder than the truth. He passed birthdays alone. Holidays came and went like pages torn from a calendar. Every so often he'd scroll through old photos. A lake, a campfire, his father's half-smile, and wonder when warmth had turned to cold. The silence between them wasn't just absence anymore. It had shape, weight, and a voice of its own. It whispered what pride refused to say. Go home. He sometimes dreamed of the old house, of footsteps creaking on wooden floors, of his mother's voice calling his name. In those dreams, his father never spoke. He only watched, standing in the kitchen doorway like a ghost that never left. Ethan would wake before dawn, reaching for air, the taste of regret still heavy on his tongue. You can run from people, but not from the silence they leave behind. Work consumed him because it hurt less than memory. Deadlines became distractions, achievements small victories over the past. Yet, sometimes in the middle of a meeting or on a crowded train, a thought would surface. His father aging, his mother waiting, time moving without him. Regret doesn't arrive all at once. It leaks in quietly, like light through a cracked door. 5 years. That's how long it took for silence to start sounding like sorrow. One evening, as city lights blinked against his window, he caught himself dialing his mother's number, but stopped before the call connected. He told himself maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow never came until it did. In the form of a message he never wanted to hear. The past was calling, and this time it wouldn't wait. The message came late. A voice that shook with restraint. His mother's that bent time in half. His father was gone. Just like that. The man he'd spent years resenting had become unreachable. Grief didn't arrive in tears, but in stillness. in a weight that pressed on his chest as the city carried on around him. He had waited too long to forgive, and now forgiveness had no one left to land on. What do you say to someone who stopped waiting for you? He played the message again just to hear her voice tremble. There was no anger in it, only exhaustion. The sound of a heart that had carried too much. He wanted to call back, to say something. Anything. But the words crowded his throat. Regret doesn't come with instructions. It just sits beside you, whispering everything you should have said when you still had time. The next morning, he packed without thinking. A suitcase, a jacket, the keys to a car that hadn't seen the highway in years. Every motion felt foreign, like trying to remember a language he once knew. The road he'd escaped was calling him back, not as a son returning home, but as a man confronting the ghost of what he left behind. The drive back felt endless. The same fields, the same horizon, only emptier. He passed familiar signs, old gas stations, the diner they used to visit after church. Time hadn't changed the landscape. It had changed him. The silence in the car was heavier than before, not angry now, just filled with everything he wished he said. Forgiveness, he realized, isn't about being right. It's about being late and showing up anyway. By the time he reached the edge of town, dusk had turned the sky to copper. The house stood the same. The paint peeling, the porch light still flickering, like time had waited for him to arrive. But his father wasn't inside anymore. Only memories were. And waiting in the doorway was his mother, smaller than he remembered, holding the phone that had carried the news. His hands trembled on the steering wheel. Coming home shouldn't hurt this much. The house smelled the same. Dust, rain, and something faintly like his father's aftershave. He stood just inside the doorway, unable to breathe. Every creak of the floorboards seemed to accuse him. His mother didn't speak right away. She just looked at him, her eyes searching for the boy she'd lost to pride. Between them hung years of silence, thick as fog. Coming home wasn't the hard part. Staying was. They sat at the kitchen table where everything had fallen apart. The same table, same worn chairs, same hum of the refrigerator in the corner. But one chair was empty now. His mother tried to speak, but words dissolved before reaching her lips. He wanted to say he was sorry, but sorry was too small for all that time. Sometimes the quiet between two people says more than language ever could. Later, he wandered the house like a stranger. Each room carried its own echo, his father's study, the clock that never ticked again, the faint scent of tobacco near the window. He traced his fingers across the dust on the old bookshelf, over trinkets he once called useless, but now couldn't bear to move. Grief wasn't sharp anymore. It was slow, quiet, like walking barefoot across memories. He paused at his old bedroom door. The paint was chipped, but his name still faintly carved into the frame. Inside, the room was smaller than he remembered. Shelves of forgotten trophies, a cracked baseball glove, a calendar frozen on a year long gone. His mother had kept everything the same. Time, it seemed, had waited for him even when no one else did. For the first time in years, he let himself cry. Night came heavy with stillness. His mother had gone to bed, leaving him alone in the dim house. He poured a glass of water and stared out at the yard, where the porch light flickered like an old heartbeat. Then he saw it. The drawer in his father's desk slightly open, paper edges sticking out. He hesitated. Some truths wait for years to be found. Others wait for courage. Tonight, he had both. His fingers brushed the leather, cracked, soft, and older than he remembered. The journal felt alive, like something that had waited for him. He untied the string with shaking hands, each knot holding a memory. The first page was dated years before their last fight. Ink faded, handwriting steady. His father's words began with something simple. For Ethan, if he ever decides to read this, his breath caught. For the first time, he heard his father's voice without anger. The entries were plain at first. Weather notes, repairs around the house, reminders to buy feed. But in between, He found pieces of his father's heart stitched quietly into the margins. Apologies, half-written. Reflections on the argument. Lines that said, "I wish I had known how to listen better." The words bled into him, each one heavier than the last. His father hadn't been cold, just clumsy with love. He turned another page and found a letter addressed directly to him. The handwriting trembled, as if written late at night. "If you're reading this, it means I wasn't brave enough to say it out loud," it began. "You are my greatest pride and my deepest pain. I failed to tell you that one didn't erase the other." His throat tightened. It wasn't an apology. It was a confession of love in the only language his father knew. He read until dawn, page after page of unsent letters. Each one painted a picture of a man who loved fiercely but spoke poorly, who carried guilt like a second skin. There were notes about the fight, how he'd replayed it, wishing he'd called after him, wishing pride hadn't sounded so much like strength. Ethan's eyes burned, but he kept reading. For every word his father wrote, silence inside him broke. When he reached the final page, the ink was faint, the words uneven. "If love is a language of timing, I spoke it too late." Ethan closed the journal, holding it to his chest. The years between them felt smaller now, like distance that could be walked. He thought of calling his sister, of telling his mother what he found. His father was gone, but the man he'd lost was still here, living quietly in the words he left behind. The morning air felt heavy, like the house itself was breathing slower. He sat by the window, journal still in his hands, the ink now etched into him. Each page had been a mirror, showing not just who his father was, but who he had become in his absence. He wasn't angry anymore, only tired of carrying what should have been shared. Pride had taken years from them. Regret had taken what was left. But forgiveness, that was something still within reach. He found himself walking the edge of the property, past the old oak tree in the half-collapsed shed his father used to fix every summer. The air smelled of soil and memory. He remembered every argument, every word thrown like a weapon, and realized how small they looked against the vastness of what love had survived. He whispered something to the wind, not a prayer, not an apology, but something between the two. Later, he stood in his father's workshop, the smell of oil and cedar still clinging to the walls. Tools hung neatly in their places, dust thick on the bench. He remembered the day they built a birdhouse together, how his father's hands guided his clumsy ones. He hadn't realized it then, but that was love too. Quiet, practical, unspoken. Now, touching the same tools, he finally understood. Love had always been there. He had just been too young to recognize its shape. When evening fell, he sat beside his mother on the porch. The crickets hummed like memory itself. She didn't ask what he'd found. She already knew. They talked softly about the garden, about Lily, about the years between. For the first time, he didn't hide behind guilt. He told her about the journal, about the words he'd read, about the man they both lost. And when she took his hand, he felt something break open inside. Not pain, but release. That night, he placed the journal on his father's old chair and whispered thank you. It wasn't enough, but it was honest. In the quiet, he could almost hear his father's laugh again. Rough, warm, familiar. He realized forgiveness doesn't change the past. It changes how you carry it. And in that moment, surrounded by the ghosts of love unspoken, he finally set his own heart down. For the first time in years, the house felt alive again. Morning came gentle and kind, the way new beginnings should. The house felt lighter now, as though some invisible weight had lifted. Ethan woke to birds outside his window, their songs threading through the same walls that once echoed with anger. He walked through each room slowly, not as a visitor, but as someone reclaiming what was left behind. The silence didn't accuse him anymore. It welcomed him home. He spent the morning cleaning the porch, sweeping dust from corners, repairing a step his father had promised to fix years ago. Each motion felt like an apology spoken in wood and nails. Grief had softened into something else now, something steady. He realized that healing wasn't about forgetting what was said, but remembering what was meant. Some promises, even unfinished, still hold. When Lily arrived that afternoon, she hesitated at the gate. They hadn't spoken in years. Too many words had gone unsaid. Too many birthdays missed. But when she saw him on the porch, eyes soft, journal in his lap, she didn't need explanations. Some apologies live in the way two people look at each other. The kind that say, "I missed you," without sound, and in that silence, something old between them began to mend. That evening they sat at the dinner table. Mother, son, and daughter. The first time in nearly a decade. No speeches, no explanations. Just the quiet clinking of dishes and the hum of the night outside. His father's chair remained empty, but it no longer felt lonely. It felt honored. They laughed once, softly at first, then louder, the way people do when grief finally loosens its hold. For the first time, they sounded like a family again. Later, when the house grew quiet, Ethan stepped outside one last time. The sky was clear, stars scattered like pieces of forgiveness. He opened the journal and tore a single page free, the last one his father had written, and placed it under the old oak tree. "We're okay now," he whispered. The wind stirred, carrying the page into the dark, and for the first time, he didn't chase it. He simply watched it go, smiling through tears. Love, he finally understood, never really leaves. It just waits to be found again.